What's up, heretics? Welcome to Heretical Hobby. My name is Jay, and today I am very excited to finally be able to introduce to you guys for the first time officially my custom Kit Bash chapter master for my homebrew chapter, the Acid Hounds. We're going to dive a little bit into his lore, as well as a speed build on how I put him together. Hope you enjoy.
Sometime during the 36th millennia, a boy was born into the toxic air and filth of the ash wilds of Necromunda. Born to simple fungi farmers of the Sludge Sea, born into a simple village aimed for a simple life. He knew at an early age that this life was never meant for him. He had fantasies of grandeur that a simple life would never satisfy. He was too big to be a farmer and set his sights to accomplish so much more. This boy was named Rourke. Orphaned at age 6, he was free. Despite the loss of both parents, he did not grieve. He saw this as a release from the mediocre life they would have forced on him. He was now able to carve his own path, forge his own destiny. But first, he would have to survive. Taking the pittance of savings his parents had stashed around their shack of a home, he negotiated travel aboard a delivery truck headed to the Acropolis Hive. Having no business inside the city, he was quickly rejected at the gates, discarded and left to the degenerates of the clustered shantytowns. Angry and focused on survival, he did what he had to do to surpass this obstacle that had been placed in front of him. He stole, fought, and scavenged for the bare essentials, food and water. He would take anything he needed to survive this slum, and nobody was going to get in his way. During his time of solitude in back alleys, he came across a pair of dogs, scavenging and surviving just like him. He saw a bit of himself in these poor beasts. They were kindred spirits, and they were capable of more just like him. Rourke started befriending the wild dogs. At first they growled and snarled, obviously abused and mistreated. They were untrusting of humans, discarded to the filth of the slums. After months of sharing food and offering his hand, Rourke finally gained the trust of the dogs, and they became fiercely loyal to him. They protected him while he slept and guarded him while awake, attacking any and all that posed a threat to young Rourke. Rourke had become their alpha. He named them Arouge and Hazir. After 1 year of settling into this new life, he met an older, charismatic boy named Theron, the self-appointed leader of a local gang of orphans called the Lost. Theron saw something in Rourke, and Rourke saw something in Theron. Rourke immersed himself in the dealings of the gang, mostly focused on small-time gambling or theft of items to hawk and food to eat. Occasionally their turf was threatened, and the need for violence was inescapable. Rourke liked the violence and enjoyed the power that it brought. Rourke showed strong affinity for planning and schemes, and eventually led the gang to larger heists with bigger paydays. Seeing Rourke's potential, Theron quickly raised him to the rank of second. The gang thrived for the next 2 years, but this was still not the destiny Rourke had been searching for. This was not enough to satiate his lust for greatness. He convinced Theron and the others that they could do more, that they could take whatever they want and nobody could stop them. All they had to do was search out a band of Ash Raiders and join them. Once they were part of the Ash Raiders, they could take whatever they wanted and live with absolute freedom. It took some convincing. After all, the boys had only known the slums, and the ash waste was an unforgiving place. Rourke had a way about him though, and the Lost trusted him. They packed up what they had and prepared for a journey which had no known destination. Armed with his determination, a pair of hounds, and his best friend Theron, Rourke led the Lost into the wasteland, pillaging settlements and villages as they went, becoming raiders in their own right, the weaker members dying off, overrun by the toxins and radiation of the wasteland, the survivors being made stronger by it. This was survival of the fittest. There was no room for weakness in the waste. The boys felt themselves changing. Mutations started to take root. They felt their senses being heightened. Their bodies grew tougher, stronger, faster. Developing a reputation for brutality out in the waste, the Lost started to become a name associated with fear. A group of orphan children washing the ash waste in blood and violence. Recruiting orphans as they went, they decided they had no need to join another group. They had strength, numbers, and reputation. What more could another group of raiders offer? Nothing in the eyes of Rourke and Theron. The lost grew bolder and wilder under the leadership of the two boys. So bold that they started raiding the raiders of the Ash Waste, assimilating only the youngest into their ranks, killing the rest. They quickly gained a reputation as one of the most feared, dangerous groups of raiders stalking the wasteland. Talk of this gang filled with mutated, violent orphan children spread across the Imperium, reaching the ears of the Adeptus Mechanicus Geners. Tasked with the 21st founding and obsessed with creating stronger, improved Space Marines, the Geners were intrigued by the possible results of the Ash Waste mutations combined with their experimental gene seed. These wild children of the Waste might be perfect for their experiments. Inquisitors were dispatched to Necromunda to locate and retrieve the lost and bring them to Mars. After a year of searching, the boys were found and set upon by Inquisition forces. They fought and they killed. The lost seemed to be a greater threat than the Inquisition had initially planned for. These boys were ruthless, and though the Inquisition took many losses, they proved to be too much for Rourke, Theron, and the lost. Eventually being forced to surrender, the boys were caged and loaded on ships. As part of Rourke's conditions of surrender, he insisted the Inquisition allow him to bring a Rouge and Azir. They were his greatest weapon and his most loyal friends, and he would die before being parted with them. Seeing that Rourke was too great an asset to lose over a pair of wild dogs, the Inquisition commander reluctantly agreed to these terms. Upon their arrival, all the boys were assigned numbers based on testing results. Rourke, known as number 2 to the Geners, excelled in all things offered in the program. Strategy, tactics, and leadership all came naturally to Rourke. He was born for this. The only person to rank higher was Theron. After years of re-education, indoctrination, and combat training, the Lost were ready for their gene seed implants. At first considered a great success, the newly born Astartes had denser bone structure, more muscle mass, and stood around 8 to 8.5 feet tall. It seemed the mutations from the Ash Waste had proved fruitful and combined with the experimental gene seed in an extraordinary way. After running numerous tests on the Lost, a strange mutation was found, one they did not account for. A mutation formed from the Becher's gland that made their internal organs and nervous system impervious to acid. A secondary effect after more testing showed that the consumption of acid had a strange effect on the newly born Astartes. It would cause them to go into a state of berserk. Faster reflexes, increased agility, increased strength. This effect made them deadlier, but also unpredictable. They became enraged and bloodthirsty. The effects of the rage, as they would call it, were increased based on the pKa levels of the acid they consumed. The Becher's mutation was dangerous, but useful. The new Astartes were trained to control their slowing growing addiction to the consumption of acid, using its effects only when necessary. Rourke showed the most promise at this, not only controlling his thirst, but also maintaining control under the effects of the rage. He didn't lose control like the others. He maintained focus and was able to execute complex stratagems while using the rage for the increased benefits. For this reason, he was placed above Theron and given the role of chapter master to the newly created Acid Hounds. Theron resented this choice but accepted his friend's leadership. They were given their tainted gene seed and assigned to the White Scars to bolster their ranks. Under command of the White Scars, they would receive their final training. The Acid Hounds quickly took to the nomadic ways of the White Scars, as it was very similar to their lifestyle in the Ash Waste. Rourke embraced the tribalistic ways of the White Scars, particularly their affinity for trophy collection. Rourke carries many trophies, adorning his blade with the skull of his first Xenos kill, a Tyranid Hormicons. This skull is one of his prized possessions and brings him great pride. He also likes to take the skulls and skin trophies of opponents that prove themselves worthy to remember. After a decade of serving under the strict supervision of the White Scars, the Acid Hounds were loosed upon the enemies of the Imperium. going from planet to planet, battle to battle, always victorious. Tyranids quickly became their favorite prey due to the acid that ran in their veins. Despite the Acid Hound's proven battle prowess and numerous victories, they were constantly looked down on. The Acid Hounds kept isolated and grew more and more wild with every battle, becoming more and more unpredictable and harder to control. They became known as the dogs off the leash. As time went on, despite the numerous victories the Acid Hounds secured, they were still not accepted nor embraced by the Imperium. They were shunned by most and denied the honor that they were owed. Rourke grew tired of this treatment and ultimately decided that this was not the path for his Acid Hounds. He was not afraid of the Imperium nor any of its enemies. His men would not die for a false emperor anymore. He grew to hate the Imperium for the way they were treated, and if they were not going to willingly acknowledge him, he would force them to. It was time for the Acid Hounds to follow their own path and for Rourke to carve his own destiny. He led his men to a small planet on the fringe of Ultima Segmentum, a terrible planet with an uninhabitable surface under constant low light and acid rain, ground filled with charcoal, plants that secrete noxious gas, and pools of black tar, a death world to the Imperium, a paradise to the Acid Hounds. Rourke led his men deep underground into cavernous cave systems created by giant worm-like creatures. He and his men settled in the empty caverns, building a great fortress monastery, sourcing materials from raiding and pillaging other settlements. During construction, they were frequently attacked by a pair of worms that claimed the caves as theirs. Knowing the worms would be a constant threat, Rourke instructed his men to seal the entrances and guard the cavern as he set off into the worm tunnels alone. Thought for dead, he returned weeks later with 2 new bone trophies. The worms were no longer a threat. Rourke had killed them both. Rourke became not only the leader of the Acid Hounds, but their lord. His men pledged unwavering loyalty, or so he thought. Thyrin had slowly lost control over his thirst, giving in more and more to the rage, letting it consume him. He grew insane and fixated on the idea that his right to rule had been stolen from him. He thought the Acid Hound should be his to lead and wanted Rourke dead. Thyrin rallied a coup and started a rebellion against Rourke. A small skirmish erupted and brutal infighting ensued. Rourke and his loyalists came out victorious but not unscathed. Locked in a nearly fatal battle, Rourke was forced to sacrifice his right arm to deliver the crippling blow to Thyrin that ultimately brought the battle to an end. Outraged and hurt by the betrayal of his closest friend, Rourke knew he had no choice but to execute Thyrin and any of his surviving followers. There was no coming back from this. He knew if he let this act go unpunished, he would appear weak, and Rourke was no weakling. Rourke knew the execution had to be so brutal that none would dare challenge him again. He devised and created the bath, a very slow execution process in which the offender is dipped to their neck in a vat of acid, slowly melting and eating away at their skin and muscle tissue until only the nervous system and internal organs are exposed. The offender is then removed from the bath and hung by the head in a way that does not asphyxiate the victim, left outside the safety of the caves and exposed to the elements until a final breath is taken. The slightest breeze becomes unbearable torture, a terrible death that cultivates extreme pain drawn out over weeks, months in some cases. The bath is exclusive to Acid Hounds and only performed on the most egregious offenders. It has earned the name Betrayer's Bath. Once Thyrin took his final breath after months of enduring this torture, Rourke took his head and adorned his weapon with his skull, not only serving as a reminder to those that would betray him, but also Thyrin was his brother, and he wanted his friend close as a reminder of simpler times. In moments of privacy, Rourke can be heard taking counsel from Thyrin's lifeless skull, conversing with the skull like Thyrin is occupying a seat at the table. Thyrin's execution changed Rourke. He grew more callous and 3 times as ruthless. He was fixated on glory, and none would get in his way. They will remember his name, Rourke rallies his acid hounds against any foolish enough to catch his scent. No one is safe. Roaming the fringe, preying on any that stumble into his space. Xenos, Imperium, all are fair game. He calls his rampage the Great Hunt, and it has no end. Leading his most loyal men into battle, Rourke has developed a reputation as one of the fiercest space pirates in all the systems. Relic sword in one hand, gun in the other, a mighty shield on his back surrounded by his dogs of war. He is feared by most and hated by all. His dogs off the leash are hunted, but never caught, leaving only a few alive to spread his name. He leads his men with ferocity and a relentless lust for violence and glory. His greatness is out there, just waiting to be took, and he will take. He is the master of the hunt, leader of the acid hound, great worm killer and betrayer to the Emperor. He is Alpha, he is death, he is chapter master. His name carries fear and greatness. He is Rourke.
Alright, heretics, here he is in all his glory, my custom chapter master, Rourke. I am so happy with the way he came out. There's a few things that I might do a little bit different in the future if I ever decide to do a Rourke 2.0, but for now, I'm super happy with the way he came out. I can't wait to drop him on the table and see what he does. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, hit the thumbs down. Let me know in the comment section what I could do better. If you guys have any questions about the lore or the build process, go ahead and drop those in the comment section below. This is a brand new channel. The whole goal right now is to just grow it and get it out there for people to see. So if you enjoyed the content and you want to show some support, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notification, and just share the video. Share it with your friends, share it with your hobby circle, share it with any discords that you're in. Just get it out there. That's the best way to show support right now. And yeah, I'm so happy with this guy. I can't wait to make more characters. I can't wait to write more lore. I hope to see you guys in the future. I hope you have a wonderful day or night, depending on where in the world you are, and I'll see you on the next one.